Welcome to D-SETI. This conversation is about the UFO of God. Is it a satellite of God, actually? Or does that even matter? These are questions I'm asking within this inquiry. This is also subtitled, Is Bledsoe's UFO of God a geosynchronous satellite misidentified as a UAP to support a state sponsored emergent UFO religion? This sounds like fantasy. This sounds like conspiracy theory. This sounds like science fiction. And in part, it is, I believe. But you'll see why and how. So let's get into this. So, my purpose today is to explore the implications of claims made around the UAP Flasher Monroe Institute Flasher UAP, whatever we want to call it. It was a UAP that was filmed. It was a pulsating light within the context of an event organized by intelligence community related individuals to study the experiencer Chris Bledsoe. It brought together academics and scientists and experiencers. They did a CE5, a human initiated contact event, where they meditated, they sent out an invitation, they looked up at the sky, and they recorded the results. Chris Bledsoe has written about this in his book, The UFO of God. The director of MUFON Canada has said this is a UAP. And right now I'm saying that I am documenting my inquiry into this UAP. It is a dialectical inquiry, meaning that I am not presenting claims, I am presenting documentation of my inquiry. Dialectic is a process of stating a thesis, an antithesis, and coming at a synthesis. Dialectic goes all the way back to Plato and Socrates. This is a civilized way of inquiry where we go, okay, this is my perspective. What's your perspective? What's going on? Let's see what it is. It's not saying this is definitely that or this is definitely that. I'm saying, hey, this UAP looked to me like intelligent communication, and now it looks to me like a geosynchronous satellite, and it may be both. We'll have to see. All right. So the facts of this story are that there was an event organized at the Monroe Institute. It's not put on by the Monroe Institute, but it was hosted at the Monroe Institute. It was organized by David Broadwell, according to the YouTube text that Rob Freeman put forward about the event. David Broadwell is Chris Bledsoe's manager, and we'll talk about that later. So it was classified as a UAP by a MUFON Canada report. The MUFON Canada report basically was a statement of authority. It's a 2-page PDF saying, we looked at this, we looked at that, it can't be this because of that. I have questioned the director of MUFON Canada via email going, how did you actually come to these conclusions? What are your sources? I was not provided any specific source except for an appeal to an authority, which was an unnamed NASA employee who allegedly checked a database and said, hey, it can't be a UFO. It can't be a satellite because it's not in the database and it doesn't behave like satellites. So we've got 2 layers of appeal to authority kind of support of the notion it's a UAP. However, I relied on that authority to spend about 50, 60, 70, 80 hours looking at this data and discerning patterns, right? And I figured out there is a pattern, there is a light curve to it. And I finally figured out it's similar to geosynchronous satellites. And then when I look at other people's research into this, particularly Metabunk, and I don't like debunking, but I do appreciate their methods, you see it's really close to a band of geosynchronous satellites in the sky. So you go, if it walks like a duck, if it talks like a duck, it must be a duck. Or it could be a non-human intelligence orb mimicking itself to look like an unlisted satellite, or it's a synchronistically meaningful event. So it's a non-physical, psycho-spiritual event that we're talking about here between all of these people that was amplified or supported by the synchronicity of seeing this flashing light that seemed rare to these observers, but is actually conventionally explained through as an unlisted space junk or tumbling geosynchronous satellite. So, okay, so I want to talk a little bit about science and religion to set this up. Science proceeds through falsifiable hypotheses. So the hypothesis, this is a geosynchronous satellite, or this is not. How do you falsify? It's like you say this is a UFO. How do you falsify that? You falsify that through identification. If you say this is a light orb, and I would put forward the notion that this entity or whatever non-human intelligence is actually more akin to what Gregory Shaw describes as the Neoplatonic luminous body. Right? It's a sentience. It's responding. This is a non-physical psychospiritual event that is acting through a conventionally explained event, but may also act through anomalous events like the low-flying orb event Chris Bledsoe sees, or the other strange synchronistic events that Dan Berg experiences, right? So we're talking about science being falsifiable, talking about it being repeatable, objective events. Science proceeds through evidence and experiment. Religion, on the other hand, is non-falsifiable, right? You can believe whatever you want, but even though science disproves those physical notions, you can have those beliefs so long as you understand those are religious and not necessarily scientific, right? So science is democratic, religion is theocratic, or something like that. Religion proceeds by singular events that may or may not be repeatable. They're subjective. That relies on testimony and not authority. These are multiple ways of knowing, and we should not unduly privilege one versus the other, but we should get clear as to what we're doing so we're not doing challenging things that are against the values of our democracies, state and religion, that sort of thing. Seems to be an interesting dialogue right now. Okay, so this is video of the Monroe Institute. I just want to show you this. This is from Rob Freeman. We can click on this perhaps and see what's going on. Right here in the sky, in the middle of there is a flashing light. And that's the UAP. So let's see, where are we? The Monroe UAP conclusions in MUFON, they say it could have been seen anywhere. The object could be millions of miles away. It's not space junk or satellite, not geostationary satellite. They're not saying it's not a geosynchronous satellite at this moment. It is visible by naked eye, seen by multiple witnesses, and is unknown. So we go, okay, why is this not a geostationary satellite? Dave says, I checked the databases. It's not there. I asked a guy in NASA who doesn't want to be named. It's not in their databases. He says it can't be there. He says geosync satellite should only be seen for 10 to 20 minutes. It's actually seen for 45 minutes. These are all claims related to there, but actually these are appeal to authority claims to someone who does not actually want to be named. There's no actual citation or reference except for an authority claim here. And we could solve that by doing another authority claim to someone who is willing to publicly speak about their experience. I have one inquiry underway right now. I hope that that expert gets back to me. Right. This is the UFO of God book. This was written by Chris Bledsoe in collaboration with a ghostwriter that was funded by David Broadwell. Most likely, who is the manager of Chris Bledsoe. David Broadwell is a U.S. federal employee working for the Department of Housing, and we'll get to that because this is what his LinkedIn says. That's it. That's all the information I have. And there's another article by David Broadwell on the internet says he's a federal employee. So what is a federal employee writing the UFO of God book or facilitating that? How is this even happening? Well, the Jim Semivan, a former CIA agent, and Colonel John Alexander have written forward an introduction to this book. So what is going on? This is a best-selling book in a religious category, religious memoir category on Amazon. So what is going on with these intelligent community associated individuals funding and managing, I assume funding, let's say, because of a conversation that Ryan Bledsoe had regarding the contract of David Broadwell and Chris Bledsoe on his podcast. Bledsoe says it was a good deal for Chris, says it was very fair. So they're really good buddies now between David and Chris. To give you more context as to what I'm up to, I did an analysis of the pulsations. I said, this is definitely geometry. This visualization took 50 to 100 hours to build. It was a lot of analysis, and each of these colored circles represents a precise geometric relationship that can be mapped by ruler and compass. And so this video goes through the 5 minutes that Rob published and adds this dimension to it. It creates a sound for the intensity of pulsation. I'm trying to figure out how is this communication, basically. All right. I don't think we'll go through that now. You can click into that. So the UAP claims, like I said, it would be impossible for a satellite to be there because its position is not associated with known satellites. Therefore, it is a UAP. If it were space junk, it would only be visible for 20 to 25 minutes and not 40 minutes. Therefore, it is a UAP. It is not space junk or a satellite because experts who have been unnamed have checked it against their database, also unnamed. Therefore, it is a UAP. And finally, in personal communications with Chris Bledsoe that are on Instagram comments, I asked, like, how do you tell the difference? And he says, they can mimic these things. And I go, oh my God, they can actually mimic these things. So it may be impossible to discern if it's a UAP or a satellite because UAPs can mimic satellites and aircraft, according to this. That's a religious claim. That's not a scientific claim. And we need to get clear about that because that's a claim to something that's non-falsifiable, right? It's not an experimental claim. Perhaps it is. I don't know how you would do that, though. All right, so again, just talking about my journey, I did hypnosis with Dan Berg. He is a client of mine. He has missing time associated with another sort of geosynchronous light, and that's why I was looking into this. He was invited to the Monroe Institute. I prayed during the whole time of the trip. He's sort of like going into the lion's den with these intelligence and community associated people. What's going on? How are they going to use him? That was my concern. And so I prayed every day while he was gone. I prayed to God of my understanding. Not the God of Chris Bledsoe's understanding or whatever. Not the God of Dan's understanding, my understanding, who I see as embodied universally, that everyone universally has access to their God or whatever, their source. So I then had a series of dreams that pointed me to a geometric inquiry. This was last year in December 2022. I then discovered geometric pulsation. I go, this is geometry. This is ruler and compass geometry. I shared my findings with the Bledsoe team. I shared my findings with MUFON Canada. I shared my findings with anyone who I could, because at this point, I saw that director of MUFON Canada, Rob Freeman, UFO World Explorer, Chris Bledsoe, studied intelligence community sponsored or favorite experiencer, Jim Semavan, Colonel John Alexander, David Broadwell, federal employee. They all sort of go, okay, this is a UAP. Let's write about it in this book. I mean, these are endorsement. This is the final paragraph or next to paragraph describes the event in UFO of God book. It is one of the only UFOs like concretely described in that book and filmed in the context of an experimental study that seems to be state sponsored. So I go, and they say it's a UAP. So I go, it must be communication. And I go, hey guys, this must be communication. If it's not a satellite, it must be communication because it's geometric. Guess what? Nobody paid attention to that except for a musician who riffed on the data. And I thought that was beautiful. And that's sort of what I ended up doing. But I discovered that there is a precedent for the light curve, and that is tumbling geosynchronous satellites, right? So I followed up with MUFON Canada about it, followed up with the Bledsoe team again. I had 2 rounds of this. At the last round, I communicated with Chris Bledsoe on social media comments and messages, and basically was told government scientists are looking into this. They're very smart. Stay tuned and watch the television for announcements as to what this is. And I go, okay, for 9 months, I've been saying that this UAP that seems to be endorsed by MUFON Canada director, Bledsoe, and then indirectly by Sema Van and Colonel John Alexander, and unnamed NASA employees, right? Like this thing has to be communication, or those people have to be wrong. And the fact that they didn't acknowledge that they were wrong, and they didn't explore this as communication in a transparent way, shows me that something is either not what appears to be. And what is that? What is that? I thought this was science. Actually, it's religion. That's the conclusion I'm coming to, and I'm documenting my dialectical inquiry here, going, hey, I think this is a state-sponsored religion, a UFO religion. How amazing is that? Okay, here's the pulse analysis of the Raduga 14 satellite, right? So this is showing what it looks like when you graph the reflected light of the sun from off of bits of the satellite as it's tumbling. You get these spikes, and you get these other things. So bright, dim, dim, bright, dim, dim, bright, dim, dim, right? According to a known rotation rate. And this comes from a master's thesis about thousands that looked at thousands of these sorts of things. There's thousands of these things on the internet. There's some guy's master's thesis is about this. His full-time job is about this. We should be asking this guy if it's a satellite or not. We should not be relying upon government scientists that are unnamed to make these conclusions. That's what I'm coming to. This is the pulsation pattern of the Monroe UAP as I've graphed it according to the open source analysis files I published in the Etiology library. We've got the dim, dim, mid, dim, dim, bright, dim, dim, mid, dim, dim, bright, dim, dim, mid, dim, dim, and it's regular. It's precise. These are, it could be modeled as a tumbling geosynchronous satellite. It just could be. So, Metabunk really went into that. I want to see if we have any of those slides coming up. No, we don't. They had a great technique around how to figure out where it is. I want to actually show some of those in the sky things, but I'll do that at a later time because I haven't prepped it, to be honest. So we'll get into that if anyone's interested in. Okay, so go to inthesky.org. You put in the cluster that this thing's next to is it's like NGC 6366, something like that, and then that's in a constellation Orfunculus, the serpent bearer. And you can see that that's like the placement of it in the shot I showed you, actually. So then you can see that there's a band of geosync satellites that are sort of like next to that area within 2 degrees of it. So you go, well, it's probably just one of those just tumbled away, to be honest. I don't know how these things work, but if it flashes like a satellite and flies like a satellite, and even though nobody says it's in a database, I've put together databases, and I know those things aren't perfect. All right, so I want to talk about the book, the Monroe Institute, the Monroe UAP Flasher as the UFO of God. So when I reached out to Chris, I said, hey, this seems like the climax of your book. Shouldn't you do more science on this? He goes, no, this isn't the climax of the book. I go, actually, I interpret the book to climax at the Monroe Institute. With the hug between the Bledsoe and the skeptics, they hug, they see this thing, and then there's a warm feeling in the book, and then it goes, if you want to see a UFO, look up at the night sky, pray to God, and surrender. You'll see a UFO. And I go, okay, that's great. So that's the conclusion. That's a final conclusion. I know from a psycho-spiritual kind of emotional storytelling point of view, it doesn't matter if this is a fact or not that it's a UFO at the Monroe Institute. It just matters the emotional journey someone goes on as they read the book when they deliver that final message or whatever. So I'm saying, like, even if the claims aren't there, do an analysis of how often a UFO is actually talked about and the science is actually talked about in the book. It shows up 50 times. The word UFO shows up 50 times. The only kind of specific object associated with that word UFO is the orb that is a Monroe UAP, and it concludes the book, and it shows the triumph of religion over skeptical science, right? So this is the message of the book. That's my interpretation of it. That's my personal reading of it. Someone else can tell me different, but that's what I understand. And we can have a conversation, an interpretive, what's the word? Hermeneutic conversation about that, right? So we can get into the interpretation of it, but I think that is actually something that we should do, because I feel as if this Monroe Institute UAP has been sort of casually used to support these claims of religious claims, and has the actual UAP sighting has not received enough scientific exploration to justify those claims whatsoever. However, the experiencers and the people managing this experiencers are claiming there are government scientists doing this work in a way that is not transparent and not science, therefore. And that's fine. I'm just saying, let's talk about it as a religion. So let's talk about divine tricksters. This is really what got me into this inquiry right now. Is this a UFO or is this not? I became fascinated with some patterns where it's like, okay, the phenomena actually mimics the either mimics known phenomena or synchronistically is associated with known phenomena. So, for example, Bud Hopkins has a famous abduction mark. It's a circle with dots in it. This abduction mark is actually a wound from a suction cover of a hot tub. It's been associated with abduction for 20 years or whatever. Same things with geometric orb formations that are actually illumination flares. Phoenix lights is a similar example, and I don't even know with that one right now. And then finally, we've got the alien implant issue, where people are saying these implants hide themselves when they know they're being observed and then come back together when they're not observed. How strange is that? And like, either these phenomena are real and the non-human intelligences are tricksters, or the experiencers are deluded. So that's where I'm sort of was at. But I read Diana Pasolka's book American Cosmic, which puts forward the hypothesis by telling in part the story of Chris Bledsoe, that there is an emergent new religion based upon UFO and NHI encounters and intuitions. She put forward the notion that these experiences can be both imagined and real. It's a similar message to my book, Missing Time Found, which says that they can be both dreams and real. Reading it, and someone else made me go, oh, okay, I get it a little bit more. Okay, I get it. This is how it's working, actually. So this is a religious type experience. We're dealing with testimony that is non-falsifiable. So that means it's a religious kind of thing, if we're talking about God in that context too, right? So what if there is a real yet non-physical or spiritual event that is meaningful, associated with these strange but conventional events? This is the hypothesis I put forward in the Archimedean lever video about this, when I realized that this is likely a geosynchronous satellite. I'm putting forward a similar hypothesis regarding body marks. I say, hey, the marks that people have been using as physical evidence for physical abduction actually are physical evidence for non-physical likely events. It could be physical. I don't know. You tell me if you've got actual evidence that shows me that this is a physical event. Show it to me. Otherwise, I'm going to say, hey, I see a lot of evidence in scientific literature that the skin can psychosomatically react, aka stigmata and things like that, to psychological or religious events. And therefore I say this is a new type of stigmata, not artifact of a medical procedure. All right, so those two are kind of related. So I'm thinking, are these divine tricksters, or what's going on? So is this a science or religion? And so the fact for me, and this is really just personal interpretation of personal interactions. This isn't this isn't conclusive, but I put forward the hypothesis that the Monroe Institute Flasher, the Monroe Flasher UAP, is actually geometric communication similar to what we might expect to receive in SETI, right? There is a regular pattern that has variation that is geometrically precise in coming from a phenomena that responded to human intention, apparently, and is a UAP. Therefore, it's clearly like what we imagine communication to be like, but no one actually seriously took this. No one actually seriously considered it. Even though I consulted with Dave, the Monroe MUFON Canada director, he's like, yeah, maybe, right? Like everyone's like, maybe, but no one sunk their teeth into it like I expected, right? Like wouldn't you do that? Right? You have an experiment, you set up this event to capture something on the sky. There's demonstrable geometry in it, and you don't have the time to explore this. You had the time to build the event. You had the time and money to bring the people there. You had the time to write a book about this. You had the time to publicize a book about this, but you don't have the time to look into the fact that this UAP is pulsating in a clear geometric pattern that aligns to our expectation of a ET communication as put forward by SETI. And there's no time to do that. I just have to conclude that there's a different order of things going on than what we might initially expect. I must conclude that those on the other side who consulted those unnamed databases were aware of the fact of how highly similar this was to a geosynchronous satellite, but did not put forward that information, that withheld that information, and actually withheld that information during the writing of the book, UFO of God, right? And the publicity of that book, of UFO of God, right? Isn't that incredible? I do want to say thanks to Morgan, who actually responded and made music from this inquiry. I think that's where we need to go with this, to be honest. I think, let's say, all right, science, religion, right, these sort of artistic, creative explorations are sort of what blends both science, because you have science of harmonics and stuff like that, and a personal experience, right? That creative thing is where the thing happens. That's why I really like UFO of God, the book. That's why I really like this kind of conversation. I just have to say, this is not science. All right, so who are the founding fathers of the state's new UFO religion, right? If this is actually religion and not science, according to the hypothesis put forward by American Cosmic in collaboration with Chris Bledsoe, right, who has published religious memoir, that's what this is, and who is clearly managed by intelligence community individuals. Like, this is obvious. I'm not sharing a conspiracy theory. I'm sharing what is obvious. You can go to Wikipedia, and I'll actually do that pretty soon. But so we've got Chris Bledsoe, who's the experiencer, David Broadwell, who is Bledsoe's manager. He's a grant policy analyst of the U.S. Department of Housing. We've got Colonel John Alexander, who wrote a foreword or introduction to the book. He's the military director and a psychic spy master. And then they've got Jim Semivan, who's a former CIA boss and a To the Stars Academy founder. So what's going on? These guys are not doing science, apparently, because it took a dream studies person to identify the connection between what they say is a UAP and known geosynchronous satellites, right? I'm just shocked that I made the connection and unnamed NASA employees haven't, that Chris Bledsoe, David Broadwell, John Alexander, or Jim Semivan have not made this connection or have not publicized this connection. Someone in Dream Studies doing creative investigation did that. So anyways, I'm just sort of shocked by this, but let's actually go through a little bit of who these people are, because I want to here we go. So we got this is my former analysis or treatment of this when I figured this out 8 months ago and notified them that there was a precedent of a geosynchronous satellite. I looked into, this is the report of MUFON director. This is my openly available analysis of it. This is my analysis software. I meant to show this all along. This is the Metabunk page that goes through this. Please do check this out. This is where I validated this experience. Let's go down all the way to the bottom to show you what they found, right? So this is the movement of the satellite over time, overlaid upon an image of where known geosynchronous satellites are, super close. This is the master's thesis of Michael Earl, where I got the light curve that made me go, okay, this is really similar. Again, this is some of the footage. Now, this is the footage where we see who actually organized this, because I want to be clear, I'm not divulging this information out of context from personal communications or whatever. This is a LinkedIn profile of David Broadwell, federal government pilot and writer. Right, so we've got grant policy analyst. We've got a long-standing kind of relationship with the federal government here, it looks like. He's written this article. Let's see if we can close this down. He wrote this article in 2022. This is probably informative. This article disappeared for about 8 months on the internet and then reappeared recently. We've got this about John Alexander, who is the psychic spy master of the Men Who Stare at Goats. We've got, let's see, this is Jim Semivan in the To the Stars Academy. He's currently a consultant to the CIA, and he's received the CIA's medal. And he and John Alexander wrote the foreword to the book. Like, these guys would know if the UFO of God is a UFO or not. Why didn't they say anything, right? Maybe they don't have time, but that means that their experience with Chris Bledsoe was not designed to film the phenomena in the way that had been described perhaps recently by Chris Bledsoe on the Danny Jones podcast. So there's something incongruent here. And then finally, this is where I publish a lot of my data. So let's get back to the slides. So where do we go? Slides. Okay. So those are some of the references. These are the guys that seem like they are supporting a state-sponsored new religion. If it's not state-sponsored, what are these people doing who are so associated with the intelligence community? What are the scientists doing, if not science here? Which I don't know if they are, actually. I think it's more like a religious sacrament sort of experience. And I think that's great. But we need to be clear about that. So finally, if it walks like a duck, if it walks like a geosync satellite, if it flies like it should be, it really should be. The Monroe Flasher is likely an unlisted geosynchronous satellite or space junk. That's my opinion. Or else it's an orb mimicking that. The activity surrounding Bledsoe is an emergent religious community that selectively uses science and faith. And that's fine. Let's just be clear about it. And I think they are, actually. I think they are being clear about it, because it's a religious memoir. That's it, because he's talking about God and prayers and angels. Like, it's obviously, it gets confusing when they talk about government science, actually. For me, that's why I'm talking about this. It gets a little confusing to me. It seems like a state-sponsored religion to me. And I know from reading history that we need to be careful with those, and we should just talk about it. I'm not super concerned with it. I think it's great, but we actually just have to go, hey, this in practice is religion, and it's not science. The activities surrounding Bledsoe are managed by the government or intelligence community associated individuals. I think I proved that by showing that David Broadwell organized the event, by showing that David Broadwell, you can check out the UFO of God book. He did the cover. I mean, it's clear he's managing Bledsoe. It's said as much on the Bledsoe Said So podcast. It's not a secret, but it's not obvious. So you have to dig in a little bit to go, okay, there's this guy. There's 2 pieces of information on this guy. He's a federal government employee, and he's written about UFOs, and he's organized this event. That's what we know. That's what we know. And so, therefore, it is likely that the so-called government science associated with Bledsoe is best understood as a state-sponsored new religion, right? I go, hey, Chris, what sort of research is going on? He goes, I'm working with government science. We'll let you know on TV next year what's going on. I go, this is not science. This is a new religion. But I don't know that. I don't know actually how it's connected. I go, these individuals are associated with the government. I don't know. I have no idea. You have to look through paper trails. I don't want to do that. Someone else should do that. It's like, I'm just looking at it saying, it looks like a state-sponsored new religion to me because of these facts. Is it? Someone else should do that investigative work. That's not that. I care more about dreams and art. It is important to note that this is not the first time in history that the state has sponsored a new religion associated with extraterrestrials or non-human intelligences. Please check out conspiracy theories related to Dr. John Dee in the foundation of the British Empire. You might also want to check out conspiracy theories related to Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley, who took forward his work, and that's associated with the space race. And then we can go all the way back to the Athenian Empire and talking about how it interacted with Plato and Socrates and his interactions with non-human intelligence. So it's not the first time. We should learn from history and just talk about it, because I would like to believe we still live in a free speech democracy who that values the distinction between religion and government. So that's what I was raised to believe in, and that's what I actually believe in now. And that's why I have the courage to point to this very obvious fact that the science related to Chris Bledsoe, unless it is transparent and unless we understand where that funding is coming from that is doing the science, and unless that science is falsifiable and repeatable according to the scientific method, it is a religious experience, and that's absolutely fine, because I value religions just like everyone else. So what? They're not really problematic claims if we're clear this is religion. And he's been working with religious scholars. Like they're using his case to say this is a new religion. So I don't see any problem with it. I just am a little concerned about it because it's something that I care about. Separation of church and state, like in free speech and like transparency of inquiry, like what's going on here? There seems to be control mechanisms associated with this story because of the unclear management chain by intelligence community related individuals. But they're likely as open as they can be and communicative. They've responded to my inquiries. They've told me where they're at. They're not actually claiming to do. I can't actually find linguistic claims that I have an issue with. It's just my interpretation. I go, this is actually looks to me like more like religion than science, and I feel that there should be more transparency. I feel that they should have been looking into the communication aspect if they knew it was a UAP. Otherwise, they should have declared it was a geosynchronous satellite. Instead of writing a book and signing movie deals about stories, they should have been clarifying the facts, right? that's what I feel personally, but they're not responsible to me to do anything like that. Even if they don't study the phenomenon in the way I like, who cares? They're actually clear and communicative and above board, apparently. So, um, this demonstrates the need for a sophisticated language to discuss the phenomenon along multiple dimensions of meaning. So, this is scientific or religious. If we're having scientists and individuals studied by scientists who are also religious believers or whatever, it creates a sort of weird scenario where we're actually seeing science as religion and treating it as religion and not doing science, but we're doing religion with the language of science. So we need to have more sophisticated language. I'm looking into integral theory. I'm a PhD student in integral theory or integral noetic science, just because I feel that's really important we get this right. And that is a theory that brings together multiple ways of knowing and inquiry to have these conversations, right? This also demonstrates the trickster quality of the phenomena, and I really look to Dr. Sean Esborn-Hargan's notion of doubleness. Dr. Sean was there at this event. He probably knows exactly what's going on. He talked about the notion of doubleness, actually, where things are ontologically indeterminate. Is it a UFO? Is it a satellite? We don't know, but something is really going on with non-human intelligence here. It's sort of what he says in that paper. That is a research paper called Our Wild Cosmos published by the Exo Studies Institute. So that's so what, right? Like, this is where we need to go. This is what we've seen. So I actually come to the same conclusions as Chris. Have faith, look up, pray, and observe. So I really want to read the final paragraph of the book, UFO of God. And let me actually pull that up because I think that's really important. I clicked it off. This is from UFO of God. This is really, this is important. This is what I come to, is an agreement with this notion, right? So this is the last segment. This is why I say the Monroe Institute UAP is the UFO of God. This is why I'm saying a geosynchronous satellite is the UFO of God, and that's okay. God's still there. UFOs are still here. You can have a relationship with them. But we can also do democratic, transparent science. So each night, so Chris is describing the experience of the Monroe Institute. This is the last segment, page 343 of the book. Each night after dinner, everyone would return to their rooms for sound exercises. And then we'd reconvene for night sky watching. Everyone had been hopeful during these sky watches, but very little was appearing. I wanted the phenomenon to show up, but felt that everything was becoming hampered by all the science and endless sort of skepticism. Two individuals in particular seemed eager to discredit any glimmer of the phenomena. I believe that's Rob Freeman, based on the hug that... I believe we can say that that's Rob Freeman based on the hug that Chris Bledsoe described on the Danny Jones podcast. He hugged Rob Freeman at the end of this. And we can also say that that was Dan Berg based on public record, the video that was published by Rob Freeman. I know for a fact it was Dan Berg based on personal communications, but I'm saying this to establish a public record of who these people are, and saying that they have stories, and that my personal experience is Dan is not a skeptic. So Dan's a smart guy. He's an experiencer, and he doesn't want to believe in the Chris Bledsoe religion, and I think that's fine too. I just don't want the U.S. government to sponsor a man saying something false about my good friend. That's where I'm at. It's like, why is the state-sponsored religion classifying my friend, one of the few experiencers of missing time that has documentation associated with it, classifying him as a skeptic? Why is the state-sponsored new religion doing that? Right? We need to answer those questions. That's why I've been working on this, and I have ranted a little bit, but I do really want to come back to this sentiment, right? I prayed about it on and off all day, trying to figure out the best way of handling this situation. Just know I was praying at that time to the God of my understanding for the collective benefit, individual and collective benefit, according to the principle of non harm, to emerge out of this event, right? The final evening, Emily and I walked down to the crystal again and stayed there for a few minutes before returning to the large group. As we did, a calm came over me, and I said to the two skeptics, "Look, just please open your mind. Don't automatically try to debunk everything you see." I told them, let the energy flow without judgment, and they may be surprised at what happens, right? I agree with that sentiment too. I like that. That's really non-dual. Real and imagination, equal footing, right? Real and dream, equal footing, all right? Science and religion, equal footing, but separate domains, and we need to be clear about that. It was getting late, and finally one of the skeptics came up to me and apologized. "I'm sorry, Chris," he said. "You have opened my eyes to something I could not see." I stood up feeling the greatest joy because my prayer had been answered. I reached out and hugged him, and I said I was sorry too. And just then, at that very moment, someone shouted, "Look!" And we all looked up to see a flashing orb. It was perfectly timed to the two of us apologizing to each other. Rob, a world explorer on the hunt to film the phenomena, had a $200,000 camera array set up at 25 feet away. He filmed that orb for an hour, sporadically pulsating, and while the star field moved out of the frame, the orb never budged. That's geosynchronous satellite orbit for you. Most likely. It was the last night, in a beautiful way to end a transformative week. Right? So that's the personal lived experience. That's the religious experience. That may or may not be what actually happened. We might have just a synchronicity with a geosynchronous satellite. How beautiful is that as a dream image, right? And I believe that may be organized by angels. I prayed for that. I interact with angels. They do all sorts of strange things that are non-repeatable and non-falsifiable, which means they're religious events and not necessarily scientific. And that's beautiful. This is beautiful. So the last 16 years, then this is the last segment of the book. The last 16 years has been a tremendous test of my faith. But this story does not end here, and it continues with you. Do you want to experience the phenomena? Are you interested in seeing a UFO? All you need to do is humble yourself before the heavens. This simply means go outside and look up. Connect your heart and mind as one. Humble yourself and say out loud, "I am here." It is not more complicated than that. God, the universe, whatever you want to call it. Do not make it difficult to connect. You do not have to follow some set of formal instructions. Learning fancy words and acronyms to experience the phenomena. It is between you and God. Just pick one spot in the night sky, surrender yourself, and say, "I am here." In reading between the lines, you too can have an experience of ignoring the fact that there are satellites in the sky that have discernible movement patterns. You can ignore that fact too and see an unidentified flying object, because you have not done the work of inquiry to establish what that physical event was. And you too can use that misidentified physical event that is synchronistically meaningful as evidence for whatever relationship you want with God. That is the nature of religious freedom as I understand it. So there you go, right? Like, there you go, right? Like, I'm still sort of at a loss with all of this, but I'm really grateful that this has come up, and it's very, I mean, I would not be surprised, to be honest, if, we ask experts, the experts that have actually done work with the these types of satellites and actually understand how much space junk there is. Where we're not actually just looking at a database and going, well, it's not there. I mean, I guess databases are perfect. Therefore, it's a UFO. It's like, oh, I'm not going to take the time to look into this because, like, I have other things to do, like promoting my religious viewpoints instead of science. Right? Like you can do that, and it can be a UFO, and that's really, really beautiful. Or you can do rigorous science and have religious experience, right? I'm a religious experiencer as well. I've documented that. I was told to go on this inquiry with geometry because of my religious experiences, because of my dream interactions with intelligences associated with orbs. They said, look into this. They taught me how. They said, you'll see geometry. I looked, I found it's proof to me that there are non-human intelligences acting through these synchronistic events. But I do not want to delude anyone in saying that this is a flying saucer, this is a intelligent orb. I'm saying this is most likely, if it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck. If it flies like a satellite, it flashes like a satellite. It is a satellite, most likely, or we have to engage in this sort of fanciful, deluded sort of, it's mimicking a satellite. Even though it might be a satellite, it's mimicking a satellite. We can't tell. It doesn't say why. We have no theories as to why it's mimicking, but it's mimicking. There you go. So let's keep going. Let's keep going. So if you want to, you can deeper dive into this. I talked about this 8 months ago. I shared this video with everyone there. I email people about this. That's what the non-human intelligences who talk to me in my dreams tell me to do. They say, talk to these people, do this sort of thing. And I did that, and I didn't see anything out of this. And so I've had to sort of keep going on this. I'm so just shocked it's not been explored anymore. All right, so with that, I just want to say, hey, dreams, D-SETI stands for Dream Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, or Dream Studies Extraterrestrial Intelligence, depending on your perspective. I believe that it's dreamlike in nature, that it is both real and a dream, that you are personally capable of directly relating to the phenomena without mediation of state-sponsored religion or science. You have a direct relationship with yourself. You have a direct capacity to work with your own dreams and dreamlike experience. And in my view, therefore the phenomena, you have a capacity to work with that in a way that is meaningful, that you can interpret yourself, and that is of individual and collective benefit. So I offer DreamWork sessions and educations through donation, by donation through D-SETI.org. Please check it out. I have a couple books that again are for donation. You can download those for free, but you could also support me by downloading or buying them. It's important to note that all of this stuff is triggering, taboo, and projection prone. All of this stuff I've been talking about is like an inquiry. I've been passionate about this in this conversation because I believe someone needs to speak for religious freedom, right? It sounds as if I'm speaking against religion or the new state-sponsored religion, but I'm actually speaking for religious freedom, because if we can detangle science from government, from religion, right, we can be clear as to what we're doing, or we can stay enmeshed with this sort of like, what's going on? We don't know. The government's going to tell us things next year on television about the science they're doing here. Guess what? Fundamentally, each of us is a scientist if you use empirical method of looking out and engaging with the world. It's not that hard. That's the thing I keep coming back to with dream studies. I say this stuff looks like a dream to me. The people who contact ETs and non-human intelligence look more like shamans than scientists to me. They look more like prophets than abductees or contactees even. And so that when I look to say, what does that actually mean? I've looked to the paper, what can we learn from dream shamanism? And that was by Laughlin and Rock. And they say, hey, shamanism, there's a universal principle of shamanism in all cultures, really. And we've only deviated from that in modern cultures. And the universal principle says each person can directly access these truths and wisdoms, that you only need to consult with an expert occasionally. It's not necessary. But right now, we're set up where all of this stuff, we're waiting for disclosure to happen. We're waiting for science to happen. We're waiting for these government scientists to tell us the truth through books, religious books, religious books and television programs. And who really cares about that? You can have a direct relationship. That's what Chris Bledsoe is saying. And I don't disagree with his message. I don't disagree with his experience either. I'm not super skeptical about it. I'm actually wondering, how can low-flying orbs both mimic aircraft and be unidentified, right? How can that happen? That's interesting to me. I'm not actually disbelieving of him. I've seen strange things like that. My dreams have told me that that is actually in part how they engage with us. But we need to be clear, because I want to be talking about a phenomenon that can mimic something, but isn't a flying saucer or an aircraft. Or I want to be talking about those flying saucers or aircraft. I don't want to be confused about those. So I know this has been a little bit of a journey. I know I've expressed some emotions here. I know that I am a little attached to this inquiry, but I think that is okay, because this UAP seemed to pass a lot of tests. MUFON director, filmed on good camera, part of a CE5 event, associated with intelligence community, these written in a book, these people, high quality spy people endorsing the book. So I go, this is, of any footage out there in the world, this is probably the best chance of geometric communication I've seen ever, right? So I got really excited about it, and to go on this journey and to really think it's science, think it's research, and discover it's religion somehow in control of intelligence community associated individuals. It's eye-opening to me. And it's not problematic, but it needs consciousness. And that's really where I'm at. That's why I'm talking about this. This is why I'm sharing this inquiry. I will likely, from this moment on, shift my nature of inquiry. This whole experience has been almost like 2 years of my life, year and a half of my life, my dreams, my work, my passion. And I understand that there are legitimate phenomena, right? This is a thing where I'm a little upset. I'm a little upset because I was taken in by the circus, the spectacle, the promise that government scientists will reveal a truth that I seem to not have access to. But I followed my dreams and my prayers and the guidance of angels who taught me how to discern the nature of these phenomena, to perform a sort of divination, a mantic art, if you will, to look up in these blips in the sky and make a oracular pronouncement. And that's what I say I'm doing here. I'm not the expert that can say this is a satellite or not. I've reached out to those experts. I am just performing a divination, right? Like, that's what it is. And that's a religious art too. But I've chosen to work with this UAP because the MUFON director asked an unnamed NASA employee if it was a UAP. And that person said, yeah. And I chosen to work on this instead of a dozen other promising candidates of geometric communication, because Chris Bledsoe has the government scientist's choice of experiencers, because the Monroe Institute has strength in our culture, has a legacy in our culture. And I chose to do these things because I wanted to believe there was science being done, and I believed in the superficial truth of what was being said. And I deduce that this is a likely candidate. This is definitely a UAP because these people said so. Actually, looking into it, it flies like a geosynchronous UAP. It flashes like one. It's not in a database, but I've personally built databases and know how imperfect they are. And so I must come to the conclusion that it is likely a geosynchronous satellite. And that's okay. So I thank you for being on this journey with me. I am also curious about what's going to happen next. I don't actually know in terms of my inquiry. I am working on 2 books. I am working on a book about anomalous geometry in association with body marks, looking into the abduction phenomena. This body marks is proof for abduction phenomena. Guess what? I'm finding similar things here. And that's okay. I'm a body mark experiencer myself, and it might be bed bugs. But geometric and synchronistically meaningful, and that's okay too. So I'm looking into that. I'm publishing that as soon as possible because I feel that that is essential to our conversation regarding interactions with non-human intelligences. And then I'm working on a collaborative book with someone who has significant footage, experimental method that is repeatable, seems to get repeated results that are clearly and demonstrably geometric, that are leading to discernible communications, even if they are not yet encoded, like binary or whatever, binary codes. There's actually meaning is coming out of this that connects with a lot more than what I've ever seen connect with the geosynchronous satellite stuff. I do need to say that that pulsation pattern has the golden ratio in it. The Monroe Institute pulsation pattern has golden ratio in there. I need to say that that analysis provided me the key to understanding there is a geometric quality to the phenomena that is discernible. I learned it through one of the trickster aspects of the phenomena with this, as opposed to the more legitimate kind of orb-like manifestation type, actual, like, what is this, a UAP? Like that sort of, like, this is from another world sort of UAP. I've learned that through there. In the process of inquiry, I've had interactions with like angelic, celestial, like non-human, whatever, in dreams, who have told me that that difference between real and false is relatively small compared to where they are from us. Right? It's like real and false is on one line. They're really on a perpendicular aspect. They don't actually care if they communicate to us through legitimate orbs or synchronicity. That's what they've said to me, and that's the notion I want to put forward here. And I also want to ground it in research, ethical research practices and things like that. So to conclude, right, I just want to affirm that you are your own UFO of God. You can choose to create that in any way you want. You are universally capable of navigating these worlds. Everyone is universally capable of mediating their relationship with non-human intelligences, with angelic consciousnesses, with souls, with gods, or whatever. You're universally capable of doing that. You're capable of mediating your relationship for your own your individual and collective benefit. And so I pray that you do so upon the authority of your own lived experience. And with that, I pray that your experience is of benefit to you and our community. May you be well. Thank you.